The architect of enmity, Carl Schmitt, and the essence of the political part. The end of neutrality. The world you believe you inhabit is a fragile hallucination. You have been told for generations that the age of conflict is a relic of a primitive past. You are told that through enough dialogue, enough economic exchange, and enough legal procedures, we can finally arrive at a state of perpetual peace. We are told that the world is no longer a battlefield, but a global marketplace, a vast administrative grid where every disagreement is merely a technical misunderstanding waiting for a managerial solution. But look closer. Beneath the veneer of international law and the polite language of diplomacy, a deeper, more primal pulse remains. When the safety of the system is threatened, the mask of the humanity drops. Carl Schmitt, the crown jurist of the darkest era of the 20th century, stands at the threshold of this realization. He does not offer you comfort. He does not offer you a utopia. He offers you the cold, hard steel of reality. He tells us that the political is not about voting or tax brackets or social justice. The political is about the most extreme possibility a human being can face, the decision of who is a friend and who is an enemy. If you believe that politics can be abolished, you have already lost. For Schmitt, a world without the distinction of friend and enemy would not be a paradise. It would be a world without gravity. It would be a world where nothing is worth dying for, and therefore nothing is worth living for. Part 2. The definition of the political. To understand Schmitt, we must strip away the modern definitions of politics. We often confuse politics with policy. We think of it as a competition between interests or a debate over values. But Schmitt argues that just as the realm of ethics is defined by good and evil, and the realm of aesthetics is defined by beautiful and ugly, the realm of the political has its own autonomous criterion. That criterion is the distinction between friend and enemy. This is not a metaphor. It is not about personal hatred. You can dislike your neighbor, but he is not your enemy in a political sense. You can love your trade partner, but he is not necessarily your political friend. The political enemy is the other, the stranger, with whom there exists the existential possibility of conflict. The enemy is not a criminal. The enemy is not a competitor. The enemy is simply that collective of people who, in a moment of crisis, poses a threat to your very way of life. And because they threaten your existence, the possibility of physical killing enters the room. Modern liberalism attempts to hide this. It wants to turn the enemy into a debating adversary and the war into economic competition. But Schmitt warns that this is a dangerous delusion. By denying the reality of the enemy, we do not abolish war. We only make it more dishonest and more cruel. When you no longer recognize your opponent as a legitimate enemy, but instead label them as an enemy of humanity, you no longer fight a limited war. You fight a crusade of annihilation. Part 3. The sovereign and the exception. Who decides? This is the fundamental question of power. Sovereign is he who decides on the exception. This is Schmitt's most famous sentence. In a normal state of affairs, laws and rules function. But there comes a moment, a crisis, a revolution, a catastrophe, where the existing law cannot provide an answer. In this state of exception, the law is suspended to save the law. The person or the entity that has the power to step outside the legal framework and say, "This is an emergency and I will do what is necessary," is the true sovereign. It is not the Constitution that rules. It is the one who interprets the Constitution in the moment of danger. Liberalism tries to create a system of laws, not men. It dreams of a machine that runs itself. But Schmitt argues that the machine always requires an engineer. In every legal system, there is a black hole of pure power at the center. You cannot escape the decision. You cannot automate sovereignty. To live in a world where no one is willing to make the decision on the exception is to live in a world that is defenseless against those who will. Part 4. The myth of the state. Why do we follow the state? Is it because of a social contract? Is it because we calculated that it is safer to obey than to rebel? Schmitt rejects these rationalist explanations. A man does not go to a trench and die for a contract. A man does not sacrifice his life for a legal procedure. The state survives because of its political theology. Schmitt argued that all significant concepts of the modern theory of the state are secularized theological concepts. The omnipotent lawgiver is the secularized omnipotent God. The state of exception is the secularized miracle. The state requires a myth. It requires a sense of us versus them. It requires a belief that our community is something sacred, something that transcends individual life. When a state becomes merely a service provider, an insurance company for its citizens, it loses its political soul. It becomes a hollow shell, waiting to be shattered by a group that still possesses a myth, a group that still knows who its enemies are. Part 5. The Global Civil War. As we move into the 21st century, Schmitt's ghost haunts our globalized world. We see the rise of asymmetric warfare, where the lines between civilian and soldier, between peace and war, have blurred. We see police actions that last decades. We see the weaponization of finance and information. This is what Schmitt called the tyranny of values. When we replace the hard, clear lines of territory and sovereignty with universal values, we create a situation where anyone who disagrees with those values is cast out of the human race. If you fight for humanity, you are claiming that your enemy is inhuman. In the name of peace, we have created a world of permanent, undeclared war. We have traded the limited, honorable enmity of the past for a total, moralized enmity that knows no borders and no end. Part 6. The Final Decision. So, where does this leave us? Schmitt does not offer a solution because, for him, the political is an inescapable condition of human existence. As long as there are different groups of people with different ways of life, there will be the possibility of the friend-enemy distinction. To deny this is not to be moral. It is to be depoliticized, and a depoliticized people is a people that has surrendered its destiny. They become the objects of history rather than its subjects. They will be ruled by those who are not afraid to name their enemies. We live in an age that hates the decision. We prefer the discussion. We prefer the process. But the decision will find us, whether we are ready or not. In the silence of the night, when the noise of the media and the distractions of the market fade away, the question remains: what do you stand for? Who are your friends? And most importantly, who is your enemy? For in the answer to those questions lies the truth of who you are. To exist is to take a stand. To be human is to be political. And to be political is to recognize that the world is not a playground, but a struggle for the meaning of existence itself. Carl Schmitt invites you to wake up from the dream of neutrality. He invites you to look into the abyss of the political, not to become a monster, but to understand that in a world of shadows, only those who can distinguish the light from the dark can truly see. The exception is coming. The decision is yours.